expected when it comes to the Kings of Napa. As more secrets get revealed, new secrets come up, but luckily for fans, you're a bit more privy than the rest of the characters on the show, which gives you a little bit of excitement. The first thing we're going to go into is just the whole having kids thing between Dana and Rose. As we've seen previously, Dana is not necessarily the most hyped about this whole thing. And for a part of the episode, you can kind of think that maybe he might have some fertility issues because, Rose has been trying and it hasn't been working, so it's time to start looking at the other person that's involved in this. However, with Yvette, going back and forth between being everyone's favorite aunt or person to, being on a blacklist, she wiggles her way into Dana's vulnerability and finds out that one of the reasons why he's not really sure about having a kid is because dwarfism is passed down from the parent and it's a 50-50 chance that his kid can become a dwarf. And with that, and all that he's gone through, whether you want to talk about the disrespect his father gave him, his mother talking about aborting him, and all the issues he's had that pretty much coerced him to work for his family, it doesn't really inspire the joy and excitement that we see Rose has. If anything, it makes him very uncomfortable with the idea of continuing his lineage, even though his ego would make you think the top thing he would want to do is sire a son or a daughter and have them continue his legacy. The next thing we have to go into is this forgiveness tour that Vanessa goes on, where when it comes to Yvette, the only reason she ends up forgiving her is because she's able to secure this man named Jason, who the King's family has been trying to get as a distributor forever. But because the King's family, as you and I have seen, are very bougie and also a little bit arrogant, Jason didn't want to mess with them. However, as we've seen, Yvette, she never left Oakland and she still got that vibe about her, and Jason really likes it. In fact, he likes it so much that the two sleep together, and that is potentially what seals the deal. But alongside Yvette being eventually forgiven, once she secures Jason, Bridget is actually forgiven as well. Bridget's forgiveness, though, similar to Yvette, is mostly for business reasons, not because, Vanessa has forgiven them for their part in all this Melanie drama. However, while Yvette is able to just sleep with a man and get a deal and her reward is, getting back in the house, Bridget's is much more complicated. With Bridget, she gets to go with Vanessa to some wine thing in New York, I think it was. And on top of being forgiven, she meets her grandmother, her maternal grandma, I should be specific with. This is a major thing because when it comes to Sandra Pierce, nobody has met Sandra Pierce outside of Melanie and Vanessa for quite some time. Now, why is this? Well, long story short, Vanessa has pretty much been paying for her mom to stay in a psychiatric hospital since it seems after Vanessa and Melanie's father died, her mother went off. And from what we've seen, she might have dementia. But it goes way deeper than that. A lot of seeds are planted that makes you question, when it comes to this wild child that we know Melanie to be, why was that? Because as we see, when it comes to his family, generational curses or traits, they pass down. The critical and very malicious way that we hear Vanessa talk, her mother's the exact same way. And it kind of makes you wonder when it comes to the father, was it that Melanie was this wild child, or was she acting up because of something done to her? Was she possibly molested by her father? Was it possible that there was abuse that maybe Melanie got that, Vanessa didn't get because she was considered prettier and possibly would say something? It's rather hard to say. All that we know for sure is that Bridget gets tuned into this, and it's a real sign that Vanessa is definitely ready to move on from what happened, as well as, like she did with Dana in the last episode, making it so that Melanie gets completely isolated. For the last topic, we're going to go into the misdirection that's going on. So, as we've learned in the last episode, Christian is very sure that Bridget was the one that poisoned the Sean and Sean's winery, but once again, August is in that mindset of I need an overwhelming amount of proof in order to like really secure that this is what happened. Because to her benefit, when it comes to Otis, we find out that it wasn't him. He ran because black man cops wouldn't you run to? And on top of that, he also thought that when it comes to the cops showing up, they didn't come because of stealing money, but because for a long time now, Otis has been stealing grapes and making his own wine. Now, to make a long story short, Reginald was supposed to help finance his own little wine thing. He didn't fulfill that promise, so Otis decided to work on his own. Now, why was he using the King's wine and not the Sean and Sean's grapes, I should say? It's not clear. All that's made clear to us is that Otis is innocent outside of him stealing grapes in order to make some kind of wine that he served in his community. So, that leaves us back to Bridget, who, even with her getting on Vanessa's good side, she still, I don't even want to say she still, the writers have it where she kind of drops hints that there's still more to this story beyond the extortion, because she talks to some random white man that we don't know the name of or get even introduced to properly, and it makes it seem like he's part of whatever revenge plot that she's on. But it's really all about misdirection. You're tasked with looking at Otis at first, then you're looking at Bridget, but then comes the whole issue of Quincy's investigation into August, which was set up a few episodes ago when Dana decided he wanted to have multiple focuses. He didn't just want to find out who the extortionist was. He wanted to possibly extort, blackmail, push out his sister as well. That comes to bite him in the behind a little bit for a few reasons. The first one is August finds out, and when she finds out, she reveals that she wanted to make Dana co-president to kind of squash their beef, and that she wasn't in fact looking for a CFO to replace him. However, now that he's decided he wanted to spy on her and all that, now it's not necessarily a bad idea, and she's definitely like never minding like us being at peace. It's time for war. Following that, Quincy, in the process of, investigating Bridget, he set up cameras in her home, and Dana finds out that Rose and Bridget have something going on. Now, whether this is a Melanie Reginald callback where they had this relationship for years, that's hard to say. What we do know is that Bridget is definitely the initiator, and there's likely reciprocal feelings, but whether it's because of Rose's position financially or maybe her genuinely being fully in love with Dana, it doesn't seem that she's ready to just end that relationship. But at the same time, when it comes to Rose and Bridget and their relationship, she's not necessarily trying to cut off Bridget either. So, fully prepped for drama coming in the future. When it comes to highlights, the first one is just how this baggage can potentially affect Kelvin and August's relationship. Now let's just begin by saying that despite August verbally saying that between her father cheating and Dana surveilling her, she's starting to feel a little bit like she's not able to trust men anymore, maybe have some baggage, but that's not necessarily seen when it comes to Kelvin. On top of them hooking up in public, she seemingly hooks up with him without getting a condom on, but who knows? Maybe she's on birth control, we just don't know it. Either way, there is kind of this give and take here. She's definitely losing trust in Dana, lost trust in her father, and when it comes to Kelvin, we've seen her definitely question a few things, hence why he had to remind her, yo, I have a kid, so when it comes to my ex and this little dude, you are not top priority all the time, 24/7, 365. And I want to be hopeful that eventually these two are really going to become somebody that feels notable, that who actually you want to root for. But I'll say this at the very least. They don't seem as much of an obligation as they had in the past, but I do feel like this couple which has the lead character in it, they need to definitely up things more, but at the very least, it seems to be on a good trajectory. I can't say we're going to stay on this trajectory, but I'm trying to be hopeful here. The second highlight for us is just there possibly being more to Melody than it seems. Right now, all Vanessa has really done is isolate her sister, and even though we know that Melanie either entertained Reginald or pursued him, there is still that kind of murkiness in us being told that one of the reasons why they started is because, Vanessa and him were on a break, and that led to Melanie beginning things. Now, what do you want to call girl code, sister code, whatever, your sister messing with your ex is pretty much taboo. But we can't forget that Reginald fostered this. However, setting all that aside, one of the things we're really interested in is just learning, when it comes to Melanie and Vanessa's father, what did he do? I don't want to write off Melanie as a wild child that Vanessa saw her as, because I feel like Vanessa downplays a lot of what other people go through and mainly focuses on what she's going through. So with that in mind, whether or not Melanie was being physically abused, sexually abused, possibly dealing with both her mother and her father talking down to her, especially since we were told that Melanie was chubby as a kid, I can imagine that she acted out because she was going through so much emotional abuse that what else would you do as a call for help? Our next highlight is just appreciating how well-rounded Dana is. He shows himself as a villain in one episode, as a vulnerable character that's very sensitive in the next, and I feel that when it comes to actors who are dwarves, it's such a limited amount of people who get to be this kind of prominent role. I mean, just think about it. You have Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones, Warwick Davis, who you may remember from Ray, and I think he was in a few fantasy movies, because fantasy movies and dwarves, that's pretty much a go-to. There's Vern Troyer, who was Mini-Me in the Austin Powers film, and there's Jason Weeman Acuna, who you know from Jackass. Note, most of those people are either white or white passing. The only real black one you could possibly name is Tony Cox, who you might remember from Blank Man, but outside of that, there isn't really a lot of dwarves who are really making it in Hollywood. So when you think about Dana and what his actor is doing, he's a lead role. He's not a supporting character. He's not made to be a joke. He's someone who gets to show the full human experience, and it's just something you have to appreciate seeing, especially when it comes to a platform / network like OWN, because it's not like it's a YouTube channel or something like, not to shade them because they do a lot for diversity, like Netflix, where everything drops at once and it can easily get forgotten the next week. There is actual marketing and promotion when it comes to this show. There are interviews being done because there's another episode next week, and it means that when it comes to the actor, he can be seen through multiple different mediums beyond just his show, and hopefully, similar to Peter Dinklage, this won't be the beginning and end of us getting to know him. This is just simply the launch pad. Speaking of Dana, I love the fact that he decided, or should I say the writers did, to call out the show in some way. Like when it was Dana and August was talking, he mentioned how this is an Lionsgate movie when it comes to the drama that was going on in their lives. And when you look at it, it kinda is. And even when it comes to Jason noting how arrogant the privilege of the kings, again, it's like, I appreciate how self-aware this show is. It recognizes that when you look at Melanie and Vanessa, you can very easily see a Tyler Perry movie. Specifically, I would think it would be like Tyler Perry's Medea's Family Reunion, because Vanessa and Melanie kind of give me the vibe of the sisters from that movie. It really does further push the idea that this show recognizes what it is. It recognizes what it's doing. And it's not above being able to poke fun at itself while it's also trying to entertain you and make these characters the type who, yes, they may seem familiar because of their backstories or the way they act, but this is a whole separate thing. It wants to tap into that familiarity in order to take you to new places and hopefully show that while Tyler Perry and other Lionsgate productions might have set up or even show that there was an audience for stuff like this, they want to take this to the next level and show you that while they might have laid the groundwork down, we're the ones truly paving the road and speeding on to new pastures. In terms of low points, for us, it's just this blackmail thing. I just don't. I can't get into it. It went from possibly being Otis, now it's potentially Bridget, who's working with some white guy. There's a question of who was this person threatening Vanessa's life all this time, and again, like we've said for probably like quite a few episodes at this point, it just seems that we have more than enough drama that this blackmail thing is overkill. And it's not even like good overkill. It's like, oh my god, I'm overwhelmed. It's more so like, oh my god, why? Because what's part of this that's supposed to make it interesting? The fact that Bridget knew that Reginald was her father before the big reveal at the funeral thing, that's supposed to help. What's supposed to her deciding to destroy the competition's crops, is that supposed to make this more interesting? Bridget saying that she could be willing to hurt or kill people when she was talking to August in the flashback, that's supposed to make this interesting? Bridget has more than enough going on that she does not need this blackmail thing. If anything, Christian probably needs it more than anybody. Hell, even August still has a very huge problem about being a lead character who doesn't really have much of a hook going for her. Leading to the second low point, which is Christian. Unfortunately, whatever potential that could have came from him knowing that Bridget might have poisoned the crops for Sean and Sean, it isn't really going anywhere fast. On top of that, establishing his girlfriend isn't really helping. Him being bipolar is not really being tapped into. His whole wanting to create a whole liquor brand. I forget if it was brandy, whiskey, or whatever. That seemed to have been forgotten, even though he was given money to do so. And it just makes you wonder, what's the direction they're going to go in with him? Is he simply there so that they can have 3 siblings and have that little bickering thing and make August the middle child and kind of show what kind of issues that causes? Or even, it'll be one thing when it comes to Dana, he could compare himself to Christian and say how much Reginald always took after Christian and invested in him, even though Dana was doing much well. But we have August there, and I just don't know what Christian's purpose is, and I'm still trying to figure out if we're ever going to figure out why is he on this show, besides eventually maybe tapping into the whole mental health thing. For the on defense topic, it's pretty much Bridget and Rose's secret, and it's because on one hand, when it comes to Own, yes, Nova and Queen Sugar was bisexual, but for the most part, we've seen her only really have decent relationship with men. So when it comes to Bridget and Rose, yes, there is a complication of, anything that happens to them as of now would be considered an affair, but it's not like they're not an appealing couple. I think in a past episode we mentioned that if they would get together, this wouldn't be the worst thing, much as you can kind of see it happening, but I don't know. A part of me hates the idea of them presenting bisexuals and that being the usual over-sexualized idea that they can't be committed to people, can't be considered flighty, yada yada yada, but at the same time, how often do you see dark-skinned black women together, especially not on like the L Word or something that requires you paying specifically for that network, but it's part of a package. Like you get a cable, you can also watch Own and see these 2 dark-skinned black women together and being very lovey-dovey and cute. So it's like I like the idea of it, I just hate the situation that they're in, and it makes me kind of wonder and question when it comes to because you know eventually the secret's gonna come out because Dana saw them on a video. How is he gonna react to it? And considering Dana is his mother's child and his God and his grandmother's baby, what is he gonna say to Rose or Bridget when he finds out? And is it gonna be something that is apt to the character that we know so far? Overall, when it comes to the Kings of Napa thus far, it still remains one of them type of shows where you see only a few active players and everybody else is just reacting to them. And while for some that does some kind of benefit, like when we see Yvette, or even when it comes to Vanessa in some ways, others like August and Christian are still flailing. And while there are moments we think, okay, we may get some course correction in the next episode or maybe somewhere down the line, unfortunately, it's sometimes hard to keep this hope when they just don't seem to have, when I say they, I mean the writers in many ways, possibly have a strong investment in these characters, or else we're expected to hold on until they come back around and then possibly have some grandeur moment.